Hit the record button. There we go.
Done.
All right. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Reading Consortium Settlement Work Group meeting, October 25th, 2021. I'm Chuck Longfellow, Chief Financial Officer, Christina School District. My co-chair, Aaron Bass, CEO of Eastside Charter School, is not able to be here tonight, so you just have me and then the rest of our dedicated members. Go ahead and go to the next slide.
So if everybody who is a work group member could just type your name in the chat as attendance. As usual, please mute when you're not talking. You can use the chat function or raise your hand if you have questions. And this meeting is being recorded.
All right, welcome everyone. We have a few things that we want to achieve tonight. Let's go ahead to the next one. Well, we're not going to go over the meeting minutes because we don't have them fully worked from the last meeting, so we will double up next time. This meeting, we are going to give an update on an event, significant event in Delaware education, just to make everybody aware. Talk about, in general, our work group focus areas. We're going to get an ombudsperson update from Shannon Griffin. We're also going to talk about the independent funding assessment RFP, coming up with potential recommendations that we will pass on up to the main body of the consortium. And if it passes there, then it would go to Department of Education as a recommendation of things that to consider in the funding assessment RFP. Also some philosophical discussion about Delaware funding system and public comment. Thank you. Next. So the significant thing that we wanted to make sure everyone is aware of is that Susan Bunting, Dr. Bunting, Secretary of Education, will be leaving DOE in December 2021. Dr. Mark Holodick will replace her there at the Department of Education. Here's a little bit about his background. I've had the great fortune to work directly with Dr. Bunting when she was at Department of Education. And I don't know many people, if any, who are more dedicated to students, their learning and their well-being. So I know we will miss her, but we also will welcome Dr. Holodick, as many of us have worked with him over the years too, as superintendent of Brandywine School District. Next slide, please. Just recapping our focus areas as a work group. The big one for this year is independent funding assessment. That's a big focus for us because that's one of the more, a lot of the other areas are multi-year and have already kind of gotten off the ground. We do want to make sure we keep our eye on all this other stuff. But right now, our hot item is the funding assessment. Also, I want to just a few down, it's not in bold, but ombudsperson, that RFP just went back out. It closed on October 12th. So we're really looking forward to seeing what comes out of that process. And as always, there are a lot of other important lines of effort that we have our eye on. Next. All right. Shannon Griffin, would you give us the update on the ombudsperson?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I apologize. My camera is not working. I'm having some technical issues, so I'll need to stay off camera for now. But thank you for the opportunity. So really quick, a group of us who are interested in codifying the ombudsperson program slash office met. We've now had 2 meetings to try to figure out the best way to do that, the path forward. So myself, along with Bill Doolittle, Tika Hardstock, Senator Lockman, Representative Chakwocha, Representative Kim Williams, met to talk about, and Aaron Bass as well, talk about the best way forward. So the decision was made to adopt a resolution that would provide a deeper framework for what we want to see the office do its structure, who would manage it. And so we all were of the opinion that we wanted to make sure that this office had the kind of autonomy that's already been outlined in the settlement, in the litigation settlement. And so in an effort to do that, we talked about reestablishing the Delaware State Parent Advisory Council, the DSPAC. They have not been active for several years now, but they used to be. I'm going back, I'm dating myself now, like the 80s and the 90s, was a really powerful parent group that really worked to make sure Title I schools were following the regulations and the law as it was outlined. And so we want to reconstitute that group so they would re-engage with the Title I work, which is, significant still under ESSA, but also then be the oversight and management for this program. And with that, then establishing an equity, I won't say office, but an equity committee that would maybe core members from that group, but also then include other key representatives from different groups, from the Special Education Strategic, the Special Education Strategic Planning Advisory Council, the Governor's Advisory Council for Exceptional Citizens, civil rights organization leadership, nonprofit organizations. So those kinds of that subgroup would then come out of that, again, to provide the additional kind of management oversight of the office. We also were interested, we don't know what the final budget is going to be for this office. Our understanding, though, it's not going to be near what this settlement group has come up with as far as recommendations. And so we're looking to potentially then have more funding, put in epilogue language by the next budgetary year. And the fact that several of those members also participate on the JFC, we think we have a really good shot at providing more money, more resources, more funding to this office to make sure that it's reaching the amount of families that we know we would like to see it reach and has the need across the state. So that's where we are. We're looking to finalize the resolution. If folks may want a copy of it and may want to chime in, I'm happy to send it along. I will be reconvening the 17th of November to finalize the resolution, and then again have the discussions around what the budget would look like, or the additional budget recommendations would look like, and then look to have them put forward for the resolution to pass come January or February of the next session. Any questions?
We have Dr. Henry.
I think
has a
Gary
question.
had his hand up.
Yep.
Dr. Henry.
Hey, Shannon, thanks for that update. I guess, and I might have missed this at the beginning. I came in a little bit late, but will your group then bring this back to us to consider and just for a discussion before it goes to the main group?
Oh, absolutely. So we will want to get the approval from the subcommittee, which is why Aaron is also on the subcommittee meeting along with Senator Lockman. So definitely, for sure.
Great. And I felt like I was a little bit unprepared to raise questions about this at the beginning, and I want to say flat out that I don't know a lot about ombudspersons and how they work in different situations. But one of the things that struck me in your original presentation was how much programmatic work, rather than the familiarity that I have is that an ombudsperson is working toward resolving areas of disagreement, or where perhaps a family feels like a student is not receiving the right services or treatment, but it's not a programmatic. It's not going to develop a program to help resolve those or do broader work. And there was a lot of programmatic pieces to what you presented, and I wondered if tonight's not the time to talk about this, it's totally fine, but I just wanted to prepare myself a little bit by understanding why the programmatic thrust as opposed to more of the conflict resolution, mediation, orientation for this work that I'm more familiar with, although as I said, I'm not at all an expert in this area.
So really quickly, great question. And so the philosophy around having it be more than just a response to conflict, right? So in an effort to be for this office to be set up to be proactive versus reactive, it's about connecting with the systems, with the LEAs, so that parents don't get to the point where they're having issues, right? And so you have to do that in a systematic way that would address policy, um, policy that may not be there, or policies that are currently there that may not be followed, right? And so developing a structure to make that happen. And the onus then is not just on families to call the office, to call whomever if there's an issue, but it's really working on an ongoing way, partnering really with LEAs and community, right? So that we're trying to address. I got those three buckets. So it's the policy pieces, right? So what policies are currently at place that are not being that there's no oversight for or transparency around the effectiveness of those policies. What policies do we need to have established that aren't currently there? And then supporting families as they're going through the system. They may have issues around, discipline, access to resources, or whatever the myriad of issues that families face, and then working in a much more proactive way in a broader sense across districts, across the counties, to begin to alleviate those issues before they become mass issues. I think that's why there is a component of programmatic planning in there, but I don't foresee, at least how we've discussed it in this design, that it would be like the majority of the work, but certainly it would be an important part of the work. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Shannon. I appreciate it.
We have Kristen Dwyer.
Thank you, Shannon, for that presentation and explanation. I don't know if anybody is on the line that had done the work with, the lawsuit, but I was wondering how much of what you're presenting is aligned with the intent of the ombudsperson. I kind of am a little bit of the same mind of Dr. Henry to understand whether or not this is, following the intent of the ombudsperson or using it more of an opportunity to create a structure that, advocates have been discussing for a long time. And, if it is the latter, is it appropriate to use the ombudsperson program, understanding, the intent, or is it something that you should do separately and create separate from that?
So because as a person representing ACLU who actually was also working with plaintiffs, that be it Jay and Freeman on this discussions around the office and what ultimately made it into the legislation or the litigation as far as the framework, which was as it's designed very much come if we call. We just want to help resolve family issues, problems that students may have through the system. So I think at its core, that's what it is. But really being more aspirational, and this is the work that folks like Jay have been doing for decades as far as trying to support families navigate the system, but also and then failing to have the kind of structures in place that would provide the kind of resources and supports that we know families need and are not. There's no structure for it. And so, if I'm just being just honest, I think it's a way, how can we marry those two things together? And so I think, and so I don't want to speak on behalf of Jay or Freeman, the plaintiffs. I've just had conversations with them, and they both have been involved in this conversation along the way, looking at the initial framework that we came up with and we agreed upon as this subcommittee. I think everyone saw the framework because we agreed on it. which had the kind of technical assistance stuff in there. It had the supports around policy, supports around research. All of that was in a framework that we, as this committee, agreed on. So this is just trying to codify that framework.
All right, we have Dr. Henry again.
I apologize, and I'll try to make this as quick as possible. I think it would be helpful when the work group comes back, Shannon, to know every situation that I've been in with an ombudsperson office has had really very clear boundaries about what they do and what they're able to consider. And in order to make sure that they're not stepping over into something that would require a lawyer, in order to make sure they're not stepping over and actually doing services that the schools should be directly providing through wraparound services for the students. And I think it would be really helpful as a part of our discussion, we kind of get a clear sense of those boundaries, because some of the things you mentioned, there's a lot going on with the regular resettlement funding and the opportunity funding that would seem to be somewhat similar to what some of the things I just heard you say. So this is really to help make sure that if we put something forward that we get for the state as much value in terms of the benefits for the students and their families as we can possibly get. And I for one was a little bit surprised about the budget amount that was attached to this, given what I understood these services. So I don't need to prolong this, but it would be helpful to understand the boundaries, because there's some of the things that we've discussed in the past and tonight that sound to me like they're maybe within the Delaware Department of Ed. There's some things that are within the local school districts. There's some within wraparound services. And I just want to make sure that as we move forward, we're really getting, we have a clear idea about how the boundaries would be set for the ombudsperson. So it's providing additional needed support for families and is not duplicative of other things that are going on. So I'll just leave it at that.
So I can have the subcommittee group that I just mentioned, those that were helping to draft the resolution. We can begin to have that conversation, and that way we can be better prepared when we come and meet next month with that to answer that questions as far as the discrete work of the office or / program. And so what, give you examples of kind of what the role would entail versus roles that, may be central to the DOE. I know that a lot of the conversations are around oversight of those existing kind of programs, and that is all the titles that is just not there right now, that this office would help to perform. So I think that's a very good question, and something that I'll take back to the core group, and then we'll try to have some more answers and some structures around that the larger body can consider.
Hey, Kristen, is that a new hand or is that the old hand still up?
It's a new hand. I just had a question for Shannon. Shannon, can you explain why a resolution? Why not just go after, a bill, like especially if there's an appropriation that is needed? Can you explain that?
That was from a recommendation from our legislators who thought they would have an easier time getting their colleagues to sign on a resolution versus a bill.
Can you explain the thought process behind that? Why, if it's, just going on because I'm sure the subcommittee had a lengthy conversation about it, but if there's value in what it is that is being proposed, I don't know. And especially if it's being backed by, this committee as well as the Reading Consortium, and then the number of organizations that you outlined. Why would it be difficult?
That's a very good question. And honestly, there wasn't a lot of back and forth. Because several of us went, not several, but a few of us went in with the thinking that we're going to talk about drafting an actual bill. And it was pretty quickly discussed, well, it could be a bill, but we would have an easier time talking to, getting our colleagues to sign on to it if it was a resolution, and it wouldn't have to be as, and at that point, we didn't actually talk about having having funding dollars incorporated in it. We weren't asking for any money in the resolution and asking for any money, but that uh, additional resources could be tied to it in support of it in epilogue language that would have to be renewed every year. That would give folks, maybe I would say legislators, more willingness to support the additional funding, because it's not something that something that have to be approved every single year and not just kind of guaranteed as a standard line item through. Those initial conversations around why a resolution versus a bill. It was really like what they thought they could get passed easier, and that was pretty much the gist of it.
Thanks, Shannon. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have Sarah.
Hi, Shannon. I'm sorry, Kristen's question brought up an additional question for me, and it sounds like maybe you won't have an answer for this, but I just wanted maybe to highlight it, and then we can keep rolling. I wonder if it is a resolution, even if it's a resolution in the 22 legislative cycle, would the intent be to then have a bill forthcoming, or would it just be the single resolution with like a recurring fiscal note or a recurring line item that needs to be approved? And I recognize that it sounds like you might not have an answer to that, but I'm just sort of trying to think through the legislation of it all.
Yep. So I don't have a solid answer for you for that.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I just don't have a solid answer for you as far as what would happen if because we hadn't talked about from a long-term perspective, it's going to go from a resolution and then like in a year out or so, then request to get it into law. I'm not really sure at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Shannon.
Sure.
All right, thank you, Shannon. And it's really great for us as a group to have the opportunity to shape this as it comes through and gets implemented. Be interesting to see how the RFP turned out on that leg of the journey. All right, next slide, please. Okay, independent funding assessment. Here are some of the things we talked about in September, and we said we would bring them back at some point. I think we're going to go maybe another slide or two after this. Just hang out on this slide for a little bit though, so people can read. And then we will bring up the draft document that we had talked about possibly endorsing as a work group to go up to the consortium to go to the Department of Education as recommendations for consideration in the RFP that will go out for independent funding assessment. I don't know if we have any updates on the timeline for the RFP. If anybody on here knows any information on that, then please, let us know. But I haven't heard anything new on timeline. I know that Aaron Bass was working more closely on getting more information on that timeline. So again, just take a quick look at this here. We're going to see it again when our support partners bring up the document for us to work on. Okay, next slide, please. Here's the timeline as we know it. We're looking at finalizing our input on the draft. We want to send the draft upward to the main consortium November 4th. If it fits into the agenda, I know the agenda is getting, it has a lot of important stuff in here. So we definitely want to spend a little time on this, but we have to have a product to send up there for November 4th. And then if approved, it will go to Department of Education. All right, next, please. And you know what? There's another slide I think that has the point values on it. Is that the next one? Okay, here's I want to do this one first and then go back to the last slide. This is how, when the state does an RFP and evaluates bidders, this is the kind of a rubric that they use. In the past, we came up with, I think, 70 of the points. And, you know, if this is the way it goes up for our recommendation, it does. But if anybody during the conversation feels strongly that something should be weighed more, or if there's another thing in here that must appear, you know, samples of prior studies, anything like that, you know, we can get that integrated into our recommendation. Go to the prior slide, if you would, with all those letters. Let me close this window here. Got 7 windows up. Okay. Oh, this is our discussion of questions the assessment could answer. All right. So here is the draft document. You can all see Kelly's screen, right? It says draft not for distribution at the top. Okay. So this is our feedback. We should change some of this into probably recommendation language. So we have the first one says, how do we define independent? Should it be an organization outside of Delaware? And I think if we as a group have opinions on that, we should make it a statement that says it should be this, or it shouldn't be that, or something like that. We have some questions on here we need to turn into statements. So anybody want to start? I don't have the screen up that has people's hands. So Kelly or Haley or Brandon, if you guys could facilitate that, I'd appreciate it. Not seeing
Any hands?
Do we have them? We don't have them. All right. As far as the outside of Delaware and independent, I believe that there were some potential feelings that it should be an outside organization, somebody who I think is not really somebody who helped create the current system or helped defend the current system or implemented parts of the current system. Somebody who's not going to be defensive of the current system. Not that the current system is the worst. It's not, but I mean, there are things that can be improved. But I think that might have been I'm just speculating, the impetus for an outside organization. But do we as a group have any strong feelings on what that means, independent? I know Dr. Henry had a couple things to say last time about this. Don't know if you want to restate those or if you still, feel that way. But, I kind of feel for you, Dr. Henry, because I know you're from the outside, but you're joined an organization that is by many considered part of the inside of this. So anyone here, or do we leave this independent statement alone in our recommendation?
So I'll jump in, Chuck, and just everybody on the call knows I never hesitate. So
Right.
I would say that one of the things that troubles me about the vagueness now is that I've got faculty, and especially Ken Shores, who's just completed a 50-state analysis of equity. He could come and talk to us about equity of funding. He knows a tremendous amount about the inequities and how Title I could be reformulated to address some of those. He shows that across the country in this work that there's I think it's a $1,400 per Hispanic student inequity. So we have a $1,400 per Hispanic student deficit, and I believe it's a $500, and this is across the United States as a whole. But he does a school by school analysis, and he's got the data sets. We, in working with Susan's folks and Shelley, we have access to a ton of data. And I guess you can say this is just coming from self-interest, but we are very interested in being a part of this. And we also think it's a huge benefit to have these data sets available to know more about the state than some outside consultants would. And we don't have a direct stake in the I don't think anybody here worked to create the system or has a vested interest in a particular solution. It's just I personally think it would be unfortunate if we were not allowed to bid because of this independent clause. But I also understand that I'm looking out for trying I'm a part of UD, and I think it's sometimes it's the in-state experts and cultivating folks who can be on call as experts because they're here in the state and they want to see the state do better over time is a real value. And I would hate to see it independent mean that it has no Delaware affiliation whatsoever. So.
All right. Any other thoughts, any suggestions on how we word any recommendation if we were to give a recommendation in this area?
I think it should be independent of direct influence of the state on the products that are put forward. But when you hire, if we were to have our faculty provide a proposal, those folks are tenured and they've got a degree of independence that's far beyond what a consultant would have in terms of what they do. So I don't think it would be somebody who has any direct influence on the findings, but I think we can ensure that by making sure that it's not a it is a faculty member and that they have independence by virtue of where they sit for the product they produce, and it's not going to be a UD product that the president of reviews and decides is in his interest. It's going to be a faculty member product that's done independently. And sometimes I wonder where the state would be without IPA, and IPA is a part of UD. So and you get independent work from them day in and day out. And I would hate to see limitations placed on IPE if they want to compete. IPA, sorry. I didn't want to. I was already thinking about time for a beer, but so IPA or the college here, the faculty from the college here, or jointly arranging a proposal, because I think the institutional knowledge that you gain should be able to be tapped at a moment's notice by the state. And I think that's what you get in addition from a connection like that. And I don't know whether Shelley has faculty that are interested in finance too, but I would hate to see, I think we need to figure out a way to make sure the product is independent of the influence of a direct influence of legislators or state agencies. But I think that's the extent to which we should go. And maybe Haley or Kelly, maybe there's some language in IPA or that establishes this kind of independence, but flagship institutions do this across the country all the time for state agencies.
Okay, so just not hearing anything else, if someone were to say, no, I totally disagree, this is against what I read this as, or what I think the intent is, then, we'll entertain that person, listen to that. But it sounds like not hearing anybody push back on this. Maybe we do say that we recommend that the department, in addition to what's typed here in the reworded section, we recommend that that the interpretation of independent is not an unduly strict one, something like that, or overly strict, or I don't know. I mean, I would think that if say it were an organization out of Maryland, if they were to subcontract with a Delaware organization that didn't do a majority of the work, that might be, somebody might say, well, they're out of it too. I mean, you shouldn't, there should be some thought put into, some judgment put into it, not just like the D word is in there, let's cross it off, right? Anybody not okay with this reworded part here?
Chuck, I'll do my best to get something to you in the next couple of days that might help refine this. And I'll ask a couple of colleagues in states that have strong groups doing this kind of work about how they do that. I think the independents should, perhaps we're putting it on the wrong point, that we might ensure independence by saying that the folks selected to do the work would submit the report to key stakeholders prior to releasing it and agree that they would address any factual errors in the support and agree that they would consider, but are not required to address any differences in interpretation of the report. And that's what gives the folks writing the report independence, is that the folks who control the contract don't control what's in the report, not where they reside or the units for which they work.
Right. I just remember there was some pretty specific language about independence in the settlement itself. So, okay. So the next bullet point we had was should be continued.
Sarah, did you want to say
Right?
something?
Oh, we had somebody?
Sarah and then Kristen.
Okay.
I think I am sort of happy to keep moving, but I think what I'm wondering is, as I'm listening to this conversation, what is it that we are, I think I'm happy with this definition, if this is the definition, but this definition gives me that the RFP is ensuring that the organization is independent of the state, essentially. And so I guess my bottom line question is, what is it independent of, right? And then we can, in my estimation, backfill, right? And so if it is that we want to ensure that the organization that ultimately is awarded the RFP is independent of the state or independent of state agencies, then this certainly makes sense to me, right? If they're independent of the system, then I don't know that this is a perfect reworded definition, but I think that that's sort of where my question lies.
I'm going to put the settlement language into the chat. So I thought I was going to put it in there. I guess I can't with the copy and paste that I just used. I was going to try to do that. Let me see what else I can do here. I'll put a link.
Brendan just put it in.
Oh, you did?
It
Okay.
says the assessment shall be done by an organization that is independent of the state, following state bidding laws and regulations.
Yeah, that's what it says. So I think what we're trying to do here is not write the RFP and not direct the Department of Education to do it a certain way. I think we're just trying to shape, give them some things to consider to shape how they actually implement this piece of the settlement. So, if we can't get too caught up in wording unless there's something somebody really just objects to and we need to take it out. But, I don't know that we're, kind of how we're going now, I don't know that we're going to have a recommendation by the end of the night to even send forward for the November meeting. It might end up being for the December meeting. We'll do some work tonight and then some work next time. I see Kristen up too.
I was moving on to the second bullet points. I still struggle with the fact that the lawsuit requires an assessment and not an adequacy study. When you are looking at how other states have approached the issue, we talk about Maryland a lot. There was the order to do adequacy studies, because I wonder if you will get a different, how much different is your report going to be if it's an assessment versus an adequacy study? So my question for you, Chuck, and the other folks that know the lawsuit a little bit better than me is, do we have to in some way do like a companion piece, whether, you know, and I'm thinking through legislation that, you know, outlines an adequacy study that, you know, would be done in conjunction to an assessment, or does the assessment include an adequacy study? Because they're just two different things. And I never see, you know, when I'm looking at other states, I don't see assessment, right? I always see adequacy. So I just wanted to say that I'm still struggling with that. I honestly think that whoever crafted the, you know, the final order of the lawsuit, maybe they just got that word wrong. Maybe this is what they were thinking that we should have done. I don't know, but I really struggle with that. So I was wondering if, you know, what leeway at all, what options do we have to do an adequacy study?
Well, I think I just popped another passage from the settlement in there. I was able to do it this time. And maybe we can put in our recommendation that we recommend that in the assessment of total funding levels, that adequacy, that, you know, maybe more specifically, or also, I don't know if that means the same as adequacy. I don't think it does, but maybe find a way to say that the study of total funding levels should include an examination of adequacy as well.
Because when, you know, Maryland, for instance, when they're, you know, doing their periodic review, it's, you know, under the premise, are we funding education adequately in order to meet state mandates, goals, and student need? And I don't know, like, to me, that's the better approach. I don't know if do we just get through this assessment and then we just try to do it right the next time? Like, does anybody else, maybe before I even go on or harp on it for any longer, is there anyone else on the committee that remotely feels the same way as me, or am I just kind of, is this just my thing?
I saw Dr.
And I'm not
Henry
offended.
pop
I'm not
in.
offended if it is.
I saw Dr. Henry pop into the chat. Can an adequacy study be included in the assessment? I think that maybe that's a more direct way of saying what we're looking for. I'm not 100% sure if there's like an official, like, adequacy study means something very specific. It may or may not. Dr. Henry shaking his head yes. So let's ask that an adequacy study, that we recommend that, not can an adequacy study, let's not do question, go back and say, we recommend that an adequacy study be included in the assessment. Yeah, because we need to make this a recommendation. Yeah. Yeah. All right. What was the second bullet that we were examining? And then I saw Sarah's hand go up and then it went back down. I can't see everybody else.
Only because I was supporting Kristen. I was sort of voting. But
all right. We had advocate for continuously updated funding report, like Maryland, every 2 or 3 years. So our recommendation, if we were to build on this, would be we recommend that this funding assessment, I'm just thinking out loud. We recommend that this funding assessment be conducted in a way that can be repeated periodically, or, I'm gonna look for people's videos,
Yeah,
whether
Chuck,
it's a shake,
I'm
yes or
thinking
no.
2 to 3 years is too short of a time period to see the
Mm.
effects. The one thing, I've been around not as long as a lot of people, but long enough to know nothing happens overnight in education, and overnight
Right.
sometimes is 2 or 3 years in education. So I
I
don't know
see,
if maybe the time should be longer.
Kelly was either high-fiving us or putting a 5 up for 5 years. So maybe we put in a way that could be repeated periodically, example, every 5 years.
Most of these solutions across the country, when they're adopted by the legislature, have hold harmless clauses that often last for 3 years, so that no school district loses funds for 3 or 4 years, and then that kicks in. Often it's overcome by inflation. So 2 to 3 years, I think, is really short. It's probably more like 5 to 8.
Sarah popped something into the chat. I can't really, let me see that. If we're rewording that, should we use funding assessment, including adequacy study? Yeah, we can formulate this in a nice, tidy recommendation format. We have that. We'll write it up that way. We'll do it tonight if we think that we're going to be able to adopt this tonight. If not, I did see, as I was scrolling through, I saw Dr. Bunting. I didn't know if you're in a position to tell us at all what the timeline on the RFP is for this. Like, do we have a little time, or are we kind of crunched to get our recommendations to you if we want to?
Chuck, I only know that there has been a preliminary draft that somebody's working on, but the comment was we would have it ready by the time that the outline says we have to have it ready by, but I don't know that exact date. I can find that out and get it to you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bunting. And then would you also make sure that they know that we do have some potential input coming up for them to consider?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so we have our next bullet is report should focus 75% on Delaware specific information. I think that like really pegging a number down there probably isn't like a realistic thing, but I think that I think our intent was that we want a lot of information about our funding system, not just a survey of all funding systems that maybe somebody canned and put in, they've already done this 17 times across the country, and they're just doing it again and just adding a few more Delaware pages. So what's a good way of saying that we want to ensure that proper attention is paid on Delaware's system, if that's what we want, if that's our intent? Any suggestions? I keep losing my screens to see where the hands are. None.
And if you don't like it, we don't have to put it in as well.
Right, we
These were
don't.
just a list of ideas based off of what we talked about at the last meeting and reacted to. So if
I'll take a shot at it then. We recommend that the RFP ask bidders to describe how they will focus on Delaware in their funding assessment, while considering all forms of school funding systems in the nation, I guess.
Well,
Don't
like
put, I guess, in there.
dumb question, Chuck. Like, what are they, like, again, like, what are they, what are they assessing? Is our system equitable? Is our system meeting student needs? Is our system underfunded? What is it? Like, that's,
Well, what it says, and I'm sure that this language will make it into the RFP verbatim in some form, maybe not altogether, but throughout it. The assessment shall consider total funding levels, the mechanisms for raising and distributing education revenue at the state and local level, and make recommendations for improvements to equity and efficiency. Those things must happen according to the settlement. Okay, is there a time frame for the funding assessment? How's the time defined? I don't know what did we say? What was our intent for this item here?
I think it was questioning how far back we have good data to, like, how far back the the bidders would look at Delaware's system and use that data, like what's credible or not as credible.
Do we want to recommend a minimum? Do we want to, is there anything that we think we need to influence on this, or let the chips fall where they may, or what's our pleasure on this item here? I see we said data won't be as detailed if we go back further than 8 to 10 years. Although, maybe there are some things where a 20 to 30 year look might make sense, especially with things like equalization and, just the tax base and all that kind of stuff of the different districts. And then, do we want them? I think they kind of do need to go back, because you want to see, statewide even, should we have them go back as far as desegregation, Newcastle County desegregation? I don't know.
I think that's, in my view, kind of moving us in the wrong direction. We
Okay.
want to know what we're doing now and what the implications in the last, say, 5 to 8 years are for the equity and efficiency and effectiveness of our funding approaches. And I don't think it would be highly relevant if we prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that 24 years ago and further back, we were highly inequitable. But what people are going to really focus on is what we see over the past few years, and then making projections into the future for the next few years about where it would go under various, when we're starting to talk about the mechanisms, we want to play that out over time in the future. So I don't necessarily think it's something we want to get into at all, but if we do, I would say that using detailed data down to the student, teachers, principal, school level from Delaware for the last 5 to 8 years to make to analyze various ways, funding mechanisms and approaches, and to use those data to project into the next 5 to 8 years into the future.
Yeah, like that. Haley's writing some of that down. Anyone else? Yeah, I agree with that. Going back way far, will tell us what we already know.
We're a majority underserved minority state. So in terms of our student population, so that has not been the case. If we go far back, we're just looking at things that are virtually irrelevant to fixing the situation that we're in now.
Right.
In my opinion, sorry.
I think maybe to Gary's initial statement, taking us in the wrong direction, the time frame question in my head feels important moving forward, and not that, especially if it is an assessment and only an assessment that we were to get in 2024, the extent to which what has happened over the past and what will continue to happen in between now and when the assessment I think what I'm wondering, and maybe what an adequacy study gets at more, is how is the opportunity funding affecting the system, or how has what we have done in the past few years since the last assessment, because I know there have been assessments, how has what we have done affected things, moved things. Should we try different things? Should we, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that the time frame moving backwards is quite as relevant as the time frame moving forwards, I think is my ultimate point.
Agreed. Yeah. All right. I don't see any more hands. Do you? Nope. Next. Oh, I just lost all of you. There you go. Okay, the next one is, let's see, this assessment is boilerplate, companion bill. I don't know what this is saying. I saw this earlier and I wasn't sure what we were saying here. The assessment is boilerplate instructions on where we are now. A companion bill charges a group to review assessment and make, there is already no, I think it's a
I'm pretty
concurrent
sure-
resolution, right?
I'm pretty sure this was Kristen, not to call you out, Kristen, but at the last meeting, I think this is what she said. And I think it was more getting to the adequacy study conversation we already had.
Correct. I don't think going forward, whatever model we recommend that is done on a periodic basis should be an assessment type. I think we should discuss, fine, do this assessment, but outside of equity and efficiency, there are a lot of other areas, maybe not a lot, I can name 3, that we really should be considering whether or not our funding system is meeting. So you can remove that. We already had this conversation, but my whole thing would be like, don't have this language for the assessment outside of the equity for anything that's developed for an ongoing mechanism. That would be something I would like the committee to consider.
Got it. The next one, what is done with the assessment? Who makes the changes? That is super important, but probably not scope of the RFP. DFAC model, Maryland legislation model, Kerwin. I think these are going to be part of our philosophical discussion. I've read a lot of the Kerwin stuff, and I know that it was spawned from a study, kind of like what we're talking about. Is there anything that we know of in that? But I looked at it for clues of the kinds of things we should include, and it's the same stuff we're talking about. But if anybody knows more of anything here that we should recommend be part of the RFP, please go ahead and let us know. I think a lot of us went and did take a look at that after the last meeting. I didn't really see anything new and earth-shattering. Okay. Adequacy study, we talked about that. Okay, these are questions the assessment could answer that we brainstormed. I think that if we, let's see, at a minimum, the organization should answer these in their assessment. Okay. So we could, unless anybody disagrees with some of these questions here, some of this stuff I think is easy. DOE already has some of this stuff. Like, what is the amount of revenue per pupil currently being raised by each district from each form of school tax? But if that's, somebody thought enough to get that put on the list, that might be something where folks don't know how to get it. So are there any, if we were to say, we recommend that the RFP writer considers these questions as potential parts of the output, is there anything in here that just doesn't belong? These are more content specific questions, Haley said. Yeah, a lot of these are just like reporting things, I think, but disparities, that's not a reporting thing. That takes some analysis. Disparities in school level, that takes some analysis. The fourth bullet, I think we could probably not ask. That should be readily available. Fifth bullet, believe it or not, that's a super hard one to answer, because in our funding, regular and special education are they're not really easily parsable from each other. If that's a word, I might have just made that up. I don't know. So that could be an interesting one. 5 maybe we can modify 5. What is the per pupil amount of regular education regular education funding versus, oh, this is statewide, regular and special education funding. That's like a dissertation in itself right there. You might not realize that. I don't know. What's the average value of a Division I unit? That's, you could take that out. That's a question that you could ask DOE, and they'll ask the finance people and they'll give you a number. Unless somebody disagrees with that, but and if you want a clue on what that is, look in the epilogue at the $26 million give back. They've got different units and what they're worth in the give back. So that gives you a clue on what the unit's worth. What's the average per pupil amount and percentage of additional funding for? I think they're going to have to do that anyway as part of the analysis.
Chuck,
Go ahead. Yes, Dr. Henry.
I hate to jump in here, but I'm worried about the approach to these questions right now, and what we have here as being kind of a grab bag of questions that kind of occur to us. Most of these are descriptive and not analytical in nature, and are not going to reveal. I mean, the first things about disparity are going to be helpful to understand our current situation, but moving forward, we're going to need very specific questions like under funding scenario A, who would be the projected winners and losers by school, if we're going to require that the district spend the amount of money at the school level. How will we monitor that? I think we're not sort of developing in broad strokes the main pieces of the study that we're asking for, and then defining the questions around the main parts of the study. But if we want a series of funding mechanisms as it's called for, that requires that we ask for the people doing this study to project out by school what the funding would look like, and then give us an analysis of winners and losers, give us analysis of the disparities of the funding under this projection. Let us know how much a hold harmless for the losers would be, and what that would cost over 3 years. The total budgeted amount that would be spent. I appreciate, and I see the value of most, if not all, of these questions, but I don't think it's going to present a structure that I would feel comfortable passing along to DOE, to the consortium, or to the DOE as recommendations. I feel like we need something more systematic, like what did the Kirwan Commission, what were the main things that they were asked to do in the studies? There have to be models of what's been done, and maybe Kelly and Haley could help identify 5 or 6 states that have had recent funding formula changes. I can tell you where to find that information and the questions that were asked and addressed, and then we can see which of those fits the Delaware situation. But I mean, I've probably been involved with as much of this kind of work as anybody on the call, and I sat down to do it, and it was just kind of I felt like I was spitballing and not really being systematic in how I approached it, and I was uncomfortable sharing that with you all at this point without more work, and I just feel like we're moving way too quickly to come up with things that, if they were taken seriously by DDOE, I don't know that I feel that we've got enough knowledge to suggest that the state would be better off for a study that does all of these. And so I'm just real uncomfortable with where we are right now.
Oh, totally understand that. And any of these questions on here, which we should probably put more like a statement of things to consider that shouldn't be on here because they're too simplistic or whatever, or not, not strategic enough. We can cross those things out, like number 8's kind of obvious. Number 9, I think that's just directory information. But the thing that you said there, Dr. Henry, about, looking at Kerwin, and then I know the thing that Haley was starting to type in number 12. I mean, if we feel like we've done some work tonight, and then maybe at the next meeting, we want to come back with a more refined document and hammer on that some more for a recommendation in December. I know that we did talk with the consortium leaders about, they were wondering if this is something we had to do in November, or could it come back in December? And so we could do that. We just don't want to miss the boat with the folks who are actually writing the RFP. So let's do that. Let's just kind of say, okay, we're here right where we are. Committee members, take another look at this document. Kelly will send it back out, and feel free to pop potential recommendations in there in a recommendation format, and we'll hammer on it for another month. Does that sound good?
So I think it sounds fine. We need some structure to decide this. So one of the ways to do that, and I'm sorry, Sarah, you had your hand up long before, but just to jump in.
Sorry.
So if we take the statement that's over here, the total funding levels, what do we want to know about the total funding levels? Do we want to know, and does that imply a comparison of where we are now to what would be adequate, and to reduce disparities by a certain amount across the state? And I think we could go to the language that's here and try to structure it. I think it's probably wiser, and I may be able to get this for everyone from Ken. He has just written a paper on across all the states that have reformed their finance systems, either by legislation or court order. And he's gotten the results of those. I think he's cataloged each of the reforms and knows what I think that would be a way to guide what we might want to do and be more systematic. And if it would be helpful, I could ask Ken to come and tell us about some of the major ways in which these funding systems vary, and we could decide if we want to know about what that would look like for Delaware in each of these ways. And I just feel like we need to take a more systematic approach to defining the questions. And I don't have the answer. I don't pretend to have the answer. I just think we're not going to get there just by generating kind of spontaneous questions and reacting to those.
Yep. All right. So yeah, we have more work to do on this, and let's all take a look at this between meetings again, and let's work with Kelly and get some, get this shaped up, get it, and let's all take another look. We've mentioned Kerwin a couple times. Are there some things in there that we need to look at? Is there an expert in the state of Delaware who knows Kerwin or whatever that we need to tap? I don't know. I have one colleague who I think was in Maryland who might know that I can ask, but that's something we need to do. So we'll come back next month on that. Let's go down to the, I know we're over an hour. But
Chuck, can I just?
Sarah, I'm sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
No, it's totally fine. I'm reading these questions, and to be clear, I'm not an expert on the data that's come out, but we did pass the resolution HCR 24 this past session. And I know that data has come back around the asks that the resolution made. and I'm wondering two things about this list of questions. And one is sort of in the vein of Gary's questions, and one is maybe more circling that resolution. Does the resolution itself and the data that's followed give us any of the answers that we're trying to figure out from these questions? But then also maybe in looking at the language that you've pointed us to a couple of times, you know, the actual settlement language, what this assessment is trying to get at, what are we trying to learn from the assessment? And then what are we trying to learn from these questions, right? So are we trying to learn how our system can be more equitable and more efficient? And then, you know, from those two big buckets, can we write questions that point us in that direction? And I understand that, you know, there's all sorts of bias that comes in there as well. So being mindful of that, but I guess I'm wondering, A, do we already have the answers to some of these questions? And then B, what is it that we're trying to learn from asking questions like this? And can we more specifically focus the questions that we ask to try and get the information?
Yeah, those are great points. So I think if we work on this more in between meetings, then I think we can definitely get closer to that. Oh, I see some Kerwin stuff in the chat there. You mentioned that data or something came back from the concurrent resolution on funding. I haven't seen that. It didn't make a press release that I saw anywhere. Is that out there somewhere for us to, do you have a link or something where we can look at all that? Or I wasn't aware that got done yet.
I think that it's been returned to the legislators who were the sponsors of the resolution, and I can ask for them to forward it along. I'm pretty sure it's public data, so there's no reason that we wouldn't be able to see it.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
Mhm. All right, let's see what we got with Kerwin here. Review and recommend needed changes, make policy recommendations. Yep. Just as broad as our settlement. Yeah. All right. We're over time. I do think we need to come back to this next month and do some work in between. Very quickly, can we scroll down to the scoring criteria? Does anyone have any, before we do public comment and then sign off until next time, does anybody have any quick thoughts on things that we should recommend, if we should recommend anything for the evaluation criteria? I know these came out of this group before, but anything come to mind?
The thing that is omitted in my view is the plan, design, and methods for addressing the major questions in the RFP, because we have qualifications, but we really don't have much about how responsive they have been to the specific requirements of the RFP. And I think that's going to need to be 30 points or more.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
And you can correct me if I'm reading these incorrectly, but I just didn't see it.
Nope. Yeah, I
We
mean,
were
there's
halfway there. We can add
process and
that
capabilities. That's a different,
in.
that's
Design
a different
process.
question though.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, anyone else?
Timeline for the major milestones in the project, I think should be a consideration here. I think cost should be a second stage, and we should determine the adequacy of the proposal. And then among those that are deemed adequate in terms of capacity, experience, and so forth, that we would then review the cost basis. But a lot of these reviews are, and I don't know if that's consistent with state law here or not, but a lot of these reviews, they keep cost as a second stage to make sure that they anything that they're considering has been judged to be deemed to be adequate by the review committee.
Right, right. Cost, yeah, for this kind of contract, cost is kind of a minor thing, because you might end up, there can be a negotiation phase after the vendor or vendors are selected. It just depends on how, DOE wants to do it, or OMB, or whoever's running this. Okay, references. We got experience. We got, I would like to know, I would like for a vendor to be selected that actually produces an actionable product, a usable product, but I don't know how to say that on a Zoom meeting at 6:17 at night. But there's got to be a way we can put that in. Do they have a history of, and just thinking out loud, does this vendor have any history of producing something that people actually use, that made an impact? Anyone else? Thanks for hanging on a little extra tonight. Definitely appreciate it. Always great conversations. Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on. I think we have, we just talk about future meeting dates and public comment, right? Is that what's left? Anyone for public comment out there? I don't see anybody. Kelly, do you see anybody? Nope. All right. So let's move on and talk about the next meeting. What do we have on the books here?
So we have Monday, November 22nd, and then we are looking at December 14th or 15th as possible dates for the December meeting.
What weekdays are those?
I'm pulling that right now. They're a Tuesday and a Wednesday.
All right. That's a little, let me see. Some people might have school board meetings on Tuesdays.
I think we couldn't do that Monday because Aaron can't do it. And I think also the social determinants work group is meeting that Monday.
I can reach out to everybody. We can send along with this poll to see which works best for everybody for this December date.
Sounds good. I hope Aaron, I can't make either of those. So we might need to talk a little more.
We can talk more.
Yeah, yeah. But Monday, the 22nd, everybody be there. Sound great? All right, thanks, everybody. And please do take a look at our progress so far and hammer on it between now and next time. Help us come up with things in recommendation format that are going to, be helpful to the folks writing the RFPs. Any other comments before we go? All right.
Chuck,
Yes.
I just got a text message back from Kim Klein about the date. And she says that the report is due January of 2024.
The report is, but doing the RFP though for the vendor, are there any dates on that? I would expect that you'd want a
Right.
vendor on
That was
board
my
with it.
question, but I asked when the RFP was due, and that's the response that I got. So I will question her more tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And thanks, everyone. And see you in November, if not before. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks.
Right.